Hello, how are you guys doing? This is your boy Rolando here again on XYSpark. And today we are so excited to have with us a special guest. We have someone who has decided to give us their time here on this platform in the form of Keith Engelhardt. Keith, it's great to have you here. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for the warm words and welcome. I'm delighted to be here as well and share with your audience.
Great. You know, guys, you're probably wondering who is Keith and how did Rolando run into Keith? Well, if I were to tell you that Keith and I were in a room together on Clubhouse, and immediately we connected as I listened to the amazing work that he's doing. But let me not take away from what Keith is doing. Keith, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do for work?
Well, I'll start with a little brief overview. I consider myself a multi-potentialite. I have lots of different interests and talents and things I explore in life. And I'm able to do that for a number of reasons that we'll speak to as we go along. But regarding the work I do these days, I focus on two different aspects that are real important to men and men's health and life fulfillment. The first hat I wear is I call myself your chief success officer. And a little nudge for some thought for the audience is, in school or in life, did you have any courses on success? Well, for most, the answer is no. In fact, it's almost 100%. So the follow-up questions are, what's that costing you? And more importantly, what's keeping you from learning how to be more successful? So under the brand of Sawatch Solutions, LLC, I provide a number of science-based, neuroscience-based, evidence-based programs that help individuals and organizations evolve and accelerate and exponentially increase their success. And I do that because too many people struggle with success. And then since a major impediment to success and then fulfillment in life is the impact of stress, anxiety, and even PTSD. Stress and anxiety are epidemic on the planet. They were that prior to COVID and only amplified during that life challenge. And men are often taught to kind of, suck it up and bulldoze through life at their own detriment to health and well-being and relationships and all aspects of their life. So under my Neuro Yoga Zone brand, I offer evidence-based and wisdom tradition-based yoga, meditation, and mindfulness programs that allow people to flatline their stress and transform the tyranny of stress to tranquility so that they can lead more rewarding, fulfilled, and enjoyable lives. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Wow, what an amazing role you play, Keith. It sounds like you're the guy that we want to go to, Chief Success Officer. And I like what you said, transform your tyranny, into success. And that's beautiful. So Keith, we'd like to get our conversation started today by just hearing a little bit from you. How did you become a success officer? What was the motivation behind that?
Well, it was a lifelong journey and struggles with my own challenges in life. And most of us don't know the impact of stress that we carry around on an unconscious basis. I certainly didn't. I got down the journey of studying yoga, meditation, and mindfulness, and then eventually teaching it back in the mid 70s at a nudge of a roommate. He asked, you interested in taking a yoga class at the Y? And both of us thought it was kind of a form of fitness. And at the time I was interested in anything athletic, playing soccer, biking, and a number of activities. And I got hooked the first class I went to because I didn't realize how much stress you carry on an unconscious basis until I experienced the opposite state. So I studied as a student for about 3 years, had an opportunity to take my yoga teacher's training from an affiliate with the Kripalu Yoga Ashram in Amrit Desai. He used to come to Dayton, Ohio, where I'm located, and do workshops multiple times a year. So that was my start of my journey. And then I started teaching it twofold. It was a regular discipline. I couldn't, not show up at class because I'm scheduled to teach, but more importantly, to give back what I've gained from it, so that others can benefit. So, and that was kind of a side hustle parallel to all the different technology careers that I have pursued, from acoustics, microprocessor based product design and digital product design, laser gauging, robotic gauging, technical training, and web development was the last 22 years of my tech career. These days, my focus is on people's inner engineering rather than all that techie stuff. Because men especially have a lot of cultural narratives that they have to buy into or have bought into. One is that independent do-it-yourself frame, and that you have to kind of, in the face of challenge, just buckle up and bulldoze through it. So we tend to do until we're in deep doo-doo. I've got my own personal journey before I discovered these tools and techniques and the neuroscience that backs it up. I was personally challenged by losing two parents 3 months apart, loss of another family member, and the loss of a job and the start of a new one. And all those challenges and stressors and trauma have an impact on our biology and our psychology, as well as our spirituality as well. And we all have a level of what's called allostatic load that we can take before something gives, whether it be physically in the body or mentally, spiritually, or otherwise. Well, for me, those events all crammed into that short time frame of a year or less triggered a nervous breakdown. And I spent 16 days in a hospital. Wasn't better off after coming out of that experience, because the mental health systems in our country are poor containers for wellness and healing. The paradigm that I was in had you up at 5:30 in the morning, kept you stimulated all day long to 11 o'clock at night, when what you needed was rest and renewal, so that you can heal from those traumatic experiences and the stress. And then even amplified further in that paradigm is they would do bed checks every 15 minutes. So you never got any sleep at night, something that you physically need for replenishing after those kinds of traumas. And it was at the insight of one of the mental health techs, took me aside and he kind of looked over his shoulder to kind of make sure nobody was listening. And he said, "This is bullshit. What you need to do is get as much sleep as you can, rest, take long hot showers to get your serotonin levels up." And that's what kind of sparked my interest in the neuroscience aspect of it. And having done, decades worth of research, digging through the bowels of the National Institutes of Health, for example, and finding the research and the studies that validated the techniques that I got introduced in the 70s, and how you can flatline the stress centers of the brain, for example, with certain simple breathing techniques that anybody can do. And then because our brains are neuroplastic in nature, what we focus on and repeat, we get good at, it's how we learn anything, is you can literally rewire your biology out of those stress states, and literally open up a tremendous amount of life energy that most of us are expending unconsciously. trying to keep up with the fast pace of life, technology challenges, whether it be raising a family or work or otherwise. So I have a personal story that I can share that people can relate to, sort of make your message, so to speak. And as painful and challenging that experience was at the time, I wouldn't trade it for the world, because it was the seeds of some of the most transformative changes in my life that led me down the path that I, pursue today of helping others overcome the everyday stress or trauma that we do. We have a lot of what I characterize as everyday trauma. Being in an auto accident is a form of trauma. It's a shock to the system and so forth. And it's no different than the stresses and challenges that our ancestor faced. It could have been, a severe storm or fire burnt down the village. The physical response, the psychological and mental response is the same. And our biology hasn't changed that much in, tens of thousands of years, that we all have a limit and a capacity for stress and challenge. And none of us were given a user's manual, so to speak, of how to regulate this biology and our mental states. Good news is we have a lot of science and then ancient wisdom traditions, because yoga itself is a 5,000-year-old science. Back then, they didn't have pharmaceuticals to treat people. They figured out how to work with your inner biology to shift states, and then, more importantly, develop the resilience to face challenge, because challenge is a normal part of life. We can't escape that. So is change. And yet our brains and our biologies hate change and they resist it. And that's often a source of, even common stress. So.
Wow, guys, man, I am so excited to have Keith. Keith just have a wealth of knowledge and experience. Do you notice how he's just flowing into this interview? And I can't tell you, Keith, I'm sitting here like a sponge, just soaking it all in and taking it. I wanted to ask Keith a little bit more about Sawatch Solutions LLC, and tell me a little bit about when you're working with, say, men, for example. What are some of the barriers that you've noticed that as men, because XYSpark is about healthy masculinity?
Well,
What are some of the things as men that we have?
Well, the main barrier is unhealthy masculinity. Here in the state, one of the early feminist writers, Ann Wilson-Shave, had an interesting observation and model. At least here in the United States, there's this mindset, this archetype of, the rugged male and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. And what she observed was there's four main myths that drive the white male psychology or system. She called it the white male system. And then one is that that system is, or first of all, no other system exists. Okay, that's the only model there is. And then the second myth was it was superior to all others, which is a complete oxymoron, because how it can be serious or superior to anything if no other system exists. So there's that double bind. And the third myth was it knows and understands everything. And then the fourth is it's possible to be logical and rational at all times, that we don't have emotions, we don't have feelings, and so forth. And unfortunately,
Keith, hold on, Keith. I really want to stop you here. I would want you to mention those four things again slowly for reiteration, because those things are so powerful, man.
They were for me. It was an eye opener.
I'm loving it, man.
Yeah. So the first myth is no other system exists. That whatever we're taught as a male growing up, or the social or cultural container, that's the only way of doing things. And then the second myth was it's superior to all others. Well, how could it be superior to anything if no other system exists? And then number 3 is knows and understands everything. And that's never the case. There's always something new and to learn and grow and evolve. And then number 4 was it's possible to be logical and rational at all times, that we have no emotions, or we shouldn't explore emotions, that we should be strictly in our logic and rationale.
This is so deep, Keith, man. I feel like I'm right now, I'm deep sea diving. But those 4 points, Keith,
You could explore those for a long time.
I'm telling you, they hang on so many things, man. I mean, it sounds like I need to invite you to come back just to talk about those 4 things. Because when in my work as I do life coaching with men and I seek to connect with men, this makes so much sense. You know, there is a psychology that goes with a certain belief system that is really destroying the male population. Yeah. Because we have some beliefs, we have some ideas that are so outdated, are so broken.
Right.
Can I say that?
They're cultural narratives that perpetuate, and with nobody questioning, or very few questioning, whether they serve us or not. So that's the main thing that I wanted to kind of get with sharing that, is that we all live in containers that have a narrative. There's a narrative in the family of origin that we grow up in. There's a narrative in the community or the city that we live in. There's a cultural narrative. There's a national narrative. And all those narratives form us in a lot of ways. When we're children, from age 0 to age 7, we're observing and learning from the people around us what's modeled as behaviors, what it is to be male, what it is to be female, and so forth. And to realize that those are just narratives, because they change with culture. What that narrative is on the other end of the planet is completely different from my country of origin. And to realize that that we're all unconsciously buying into and living into those narrative containers from age 7 or 0 to 7. Our brain has not developed its frontal lobes or executive centers. Those really don't start evolving till age 7, and beyond don't mature till age 25. So from a neuroscience or brain perspective, the way we learn is through observing and imitating the behaviors and choices others people make. And it's almost in a theta or hypnotic state. We just absorb it unconsciously. And then anything that we learn becomes an unconscious habit. When I first learned how to ride a bicycle, I had to think about it, downward pressure on the pedals, and how to steer, balance. I'm doing it on a globe that's spinning in space. And whether we realize not, there's a centrifugal force there. And our body and our biology picks up that experience, and it just gets as encoded as muscle memory and unconscious ways of responding in life. So that's riding a bike is no different than anything else. We learn a lot of what we're doing is unconscious habit. Research varies on it. Some people say 90%, other people say as high as 99%. The point is, we're not consciously observing it. We're getting triggered by events in life and we're just responding. So until we start questioning that and observing that, we're all repeating behaviors that may or may not serve us. So that's where the power comes in, is actually, first of all, being aware of, yeah, okay. And those habits are hard to break. There's an awesome video on YouTube, if you look for it, it's called The Backwards Bicycle, and it demonstrates that, of how ingrained those neural patterns of behaviors, beliefs, and so forth get encoded in the brain. This young kid, some welder friends played a trick on him. They put an extra gear in the bicycle handlebars, so when you turn left, it goes right, and when you turn right, it goes left. Well, your rational mind will say that you can just turn the opposite direction when you want to ride the bike. Nobody can ride the bike, because the algorithm encoded in the brain, the neural patterns that have been formed for that as unconscious habit, are that complex. It took him 90 days of practicing to rewire his brain so he could ride the backwards bike. And then he couldn't ride a regular bike
Oh, wow.
because it got a new recipe, a new algorithm. So
Yeah.
he had to unlearn what he just learned so he could go back and ride the bike. But it's a powerful demonstration of how the brain gets stuck in these patterns and habit that become unconscious. And then more importantly, that we can change them.
How? So when you're working with a man, because I mean, a lot of guys, they struggle with substances, they struggle in
Right,
their relationships, a lot unhealthy, they struggle with self-esteem, and they struggle with negative thoughts.
right,
They really struggle with themselves, and a lot of guys, they try to make up for that by spending a lot of hours in the gym or by
right, right.
drinking in excess
We're
or
medicating our
yeah.
unconscious feelings of feeling stressed, feeling angst. It gets pursued in a lot of different ways. It could be through use of chemistry, drugs. It could be becoming a workaholic, so you don't have to feel. It can be shopaholic, gambling. There's no lack of creativity in the human species of ways to avoid feeling.
Mm,
And recognizing they have stress, especially when there's a strong narrative around that you're supposed to suck it up, buttercup, and bulldoze through life, and that you just you'll overcome it. Well, you can't fight
mm,
your biology.
mm,
It may sound a little woo to some people, but um, we are naturally wired with midbrain responses. Either when we have challenge or stress, the response is going to be either fight, flight, fleeing, um, freezing, we shut down, we disassociate, or appeasing, often
mm,
referred to as fawning. And it's our neurobiology. It was there for our survival. It serves us in the appropriate circumstances. If I'm being threatened by a wild animal when I'm foraging through the woods like my ancestors did, and I'm seeking shelter and the leaves rustle, I got to make a quick assessment whether that's a large feline that's going to eat me for kibbles for dinner, or whether it's just the wind blowing the leaves. But our biology will be triggered by that in one of those four responses. And we're going to have emotions and feeling around it. Could be fear, um, could be anger, could be a number of emotions. And unfortunately, males are not taught to express their feelings. Like, how many men got the message as a child, don't cry, it's, you're girly or whatever. Well, our neurobiology is no difference. We have emotions for a reason. It's energy in motion. It needs to be released. And most, or a great deal of men rather, fear, expressing or feeling emotion. So you're fighting your own biology,
mm.
which adds another layer of
Wow.
stress.
Wow.
So when we recognize how this amazing piece of machinery that I'm embodied in functions and how to regulate it, and then realize they're just emotions, they're neurochemical responses, even sadness or grief is a wave of energy. Neurobiologically, it usually doesn't last more than 90 seconds. It might come in successive waves where I have to surf the
90
tide a
seconds.
little bit, but the actual neurobiological response can be about as low as 90 seconds or less. Um, and
Wow.
we're doing great damage to our bodies when we stuff that inward. It impacts us all the way down to the cellular level, and in fact rewires our genes. We have science that proves that and it's the source of a lot of illness and health. Most of diseases in modern times, cancer, diabetes, and even heart disease, most of them are rooted in stress and us not honoring our God-given biological responses to events in life.
Man, this is so rich, Keith, and so deep, man. I could listen to you all day, man. Just open us up to these beautiful things. Keith, let me ask you, what would you say are some of the solutions? Because we don't want to be wrapping up our conversation before we sort of
Yeah.
say to the men who are listening to
Sure. Well,
XYSpark.
first solution is recognize that you're human, that the feelings or um, even our brains have a negative bias. It's looking for the potholes life. So the negative thinking that we have is natural. We have anywhere from 40 to 60,000 thoughts a day, and most of them negative. But we can literally change that and rewire it to be more positive. And who wouldn't want 40 to 60,000 thoughts a day if it was for joy, exuberance, and life fulfillment?
Mhm,
So
mhm,
recognize that, okay, these are just natural characteristics of being human. It's not unmanly or whatever. And then emotions and feelings are natural. And if we let that stuff out instead of storing it in, we're going to free up a lot of life energy. And then more importantly, have um, a release of toxic chemicals that are accumulating in our body, whether it be related in anger, fear, or whatever. And all that toxic chemistry is part of a natural response to, you know, what we perceive as threatening and so forth. And then, so that's the first thing, is having awareness and acceptance that, okay, there's part of my humanness that maybe I need to learn how to master. And then when it comes to stress, there's some very powerful, simple, not going to say easy, simple techniques, simple breath techniques that will flatline the stress centers in the brain. And then back to that bicycle example, what I focus on and repeat, I get good at. So I can literally learn different ways of reacting and responding to life. There's an infinite number of potential responses to anything outside that's happening, whether it be stress, challenging, or trauma. And one of them is no response.
wow,
And you can literally get to a mental state of controlling your mind and biology and mindset where you just observe, you don't respond.
wow. Just observing.
Yeah.
Wow. Keith,
Because
man.
the stress isn't out there. That's just an outside activating event. The stress is in here, my
Ooh,
response to it.
ooh. So it's a matter of my reaction and my interpretation of it.
Exactly. And a good example of that, I was the president of a homeowners association for a while, and I would get calls that there was a thunderstorm, lightning hit a tree and a branch fell to the ground. And I get phone calls and they go, well, you know, when are you going to do something about this tree branch? I'm afraid of it blowing and hitting my house. Well, it weighs about 1,000 pounds. It's a third of a tree that's split and is laying on the ground, still attached to the degree. And if the wind of the storm gets strong enough that lifts that up, we got other problems. The roof is probably blown off your house. Across the street, an 85-year-old's calling me and wanting to know where she can go, whether she can go out there with her electric chainsaw and saw it up for firewood. Same trigger in life, same activating event. The difference in the response is here, how I'm choosing to react to it based on the beliefs that often are unconscious, the narratives that I talked about of how you respond to outside situations. And
Mhm.
it's possible to literally rewire your biology for your benefit, and learn the techniques to yes, life is going to have change, it's going to have challenge, even chaos at times, but I can keep a calm, relaxed state through all of it, or the resilience to recover from what might be a normal biological response. Because yeah, it's going to be traumatic if you're, you know, caught in a weather storm. We had 5 tornadoes in Ohio in 2018. That's going to be a dramatic upset to people's lives. um, but instead of being totally um, incapacitated by stress around that, you can literally learn how to master your biology to you know, weather through it and literally come out maybe ahead of where we were going into it.
Wow, thank you, Keith. You know, Keith, what you said, it falls right in line with something that I've said here on XYSpark so many times, that our one of our greatest responsibility on the planet is to give ourselves permission to be human as men. That's the first thing. And then the second one that you said, right in line with something that I normally said, which is normally say rather, which is one of the greatest gifts that we have as human beings is the gift of choice. So
Yep.
I have to choose how I react and how I respond to something. Keith, it was so great to have you, man, on
And
our
choice is
program.
rooted in awareness. First, we have to be aware of how we're being triggered, how we're responding, and then we have an infinite number of choices of how to, transform that
Fantastic.
tranquility.
Listen to me, guys. We have Keith Engelhardt here. What an amazing interview we had. Keith, just before we wrap up, in case one of our listeners would like to reach out and connect with you, how would they reach out? Because, guys, listen, Keith is, remember what he says, he's a chief success officer, not just, he's a chief. He's like a wizard in the business. This is the guy you want to connect with. Okay. So, Keith, how do they reach you? How do they connect
Well,
with
you can find me at, I have over a dozen websites, but my two primary ones are sawatchsolutions.com
you? Mhm.
and neuroyoga.zone. So neuroyoga, all one word, .zone. And that's neuroscience-based yoga, meditation, and mindfulness programs that allow you to transform that tyranny of stress to tranquility. And then the sawatchsolutions.com brand has a number of success-based program, wellness-based programs for individuals and organizations.
Thank you so much. Listen, guys, you cannot afford to miss our next guest. We have just started. Keith, I'm going to invite Keith to come back because I want Keith to talk some more about those 4 areas that he mentioned today. It really had me sitting literally on the edge of my seat, guys, because this was good stuff. Keith, we thank you so much for being here on our program, on this platform here in XYSpark, where we continue to promote healthy masculinity. We appreciate
My pleasure. And thank my teachers, because I've had a lot of insightful men that I've learned from over the years that have led me to my understanding and hopefully wisdoms.
Yes, great. Thank you so much, Keith. As usual, guys, I continue to remind you, this is your boy Rolando here on XYSpark. We're glad that you decided to join us today and to listen to this interview. And we continue to remind you that at XYSpark, we believe that there is a spark in you.